friends, my name is Millie and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to bring you a tier ranking video of all of the fantasy books that I read last year. So it might be a little bit late to be doing this kind of video. I know that this is probably the kind of thing you would post in like January. But you know me, I'm always behind on these kinds of things, so we're doing it now. I was just kind of trying to think of what kind of video to film, and I feel like this would be a fun one. And so I've created a tier list, and I love watching these videos, so hopefully you will enjoy this one. So looking at the tiers that we've got, I have created 5 tiers, and obviously they are Taylor Swift inspired names. So at the very bottom we have got should have said no, and that is that the publishers should have said no to publishing these books. These are ones that I did not enjoy, ones that I would not recommend, and I don't think should have been published. Above that we've got I Forgot That You Existed, which is pretty self-explanatory. I forgot that I read these, forgot that they were even existed, don't really have a whole lot to say about them. In the middle tier we've got Mr. Perfectly Fine, because these books were just perfectly fine. They were middle of the road, they were average, they were enjoyable, not forgettable, but not super memorable, not favourites. And above that we've got I Had a Marvellous Time. That is like 4-star reads, 4.5 stars, or even maybe 5 stars that just aren't quite in my favourites. So I feel like that category is going to be the biggest one. And then at the very top we have got Help, I'm Still at the Restaurant. And that is books that I still think about on a daily basis, books that I wish I could read again for the first time, books that have touched my soul, touched my heart, and that I feel completely blown away by. Completely blown over by, books that I'm like, I'm still there, I'm still thinking about this book all the time. So those are our tiers. So I think that the website has sort of randomly put them in, it saved them like kind of alphabetically, so we'll go with that. So the first one that we've got is An Academy for Liars by Alexis Henderson. This I read for the Goodreads Choice Awards fantasy category video that I did, and I enjoyed it. I think this is, I'm probably going to end up changing these around, but I think that is I Had a Marvellous Time. Then we've got The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King. Unfortunately this is gonna go in Mr. Perfectly Fine. I mean, I read the first book in 2024 as well, so I will include that in this tier ranking obviously, but compared to the first book, not as much fun, I would say. The Atlas Complex, is it mean to put it in should have said no? That's how I feel, honestly. I loved the Atlas 6 when I read it a couple of years ago, but the series since then got progressively worse. I feel like I enjoyed the Atlas Complex more than I enjoyed the Atlas Paradox, but still, it should have just been a standalone book. The Atlas 6 should have just been standalone. Before the Devil Breaks You, that is the 3rd book in the Diviner series by Libba Bray, and honestly, I really enjoyed the series, so that is going to go in I Had a Marvellous Time. I'm not sure I can quite remember which storyline that book follows, but I did really enjoy the series as a whole, so we'll put that there for now. The Blackbird Oracle is Should Have Said No. That is the latest book in the All Souls series by Deborah Harkness, and honestly I really didn't like it at all. The series should have just stayed as a trilogy, or at least done something differently with this book, because it was just not, it was not the one. Bitter Blue is Mr. Perfectly Fine. I have issues with this series. I didn't really like the first book in the series, loved the second book, and now the 3rd book, Bitter Blue, was just like average again. So hopefully the 4th book will be better. Blood of the Old Kings honestly is I Forgot That You Existed. I completely forgot that I read this, and the same goes for The Absinthe Underground by Jamie Pacton. Both of them I just forgot that I read last year, so not standing out to me in any way. To Cage of God is I Had a Marvellous Time. This was really good. I feel like this has gotten some I remember seeing it had some pretty low reviews on Goodreads, but I really enjoyed this. It was a lot of fun. I feel like the sequel is going to be even better, so I had a good time. Castle of the Cursed is Should Have Said No. This needed some serious editing. Yeah. Bookshops and Bone Dust. I had a marvellous time reading this. So cute and cozy. Not as good as Legends and Lattes. I think that's a very hard book to live up to, even with a prequel, but I had a really good time. Cursed Crowns. Also, I had a marvellous time. And so is Burning Crowns, honestly. Twin Crowns is in here somewhere too. I read the whole series like in a week. Loved the series as a whole. I don't think any of them were quite 5-star reads for me, but I loved the series as a whole. It was so fun, addictive to read, just a good time. So, The Crimson Moth. Okay, I'm going to be controversial. It's going in I had a marvellous time. It's only controversial because it's not quite in my top ranking. It was a 4.5-star read for me and not quite a 5-star read, but I do think if I reread it, then it would be 5 stars. So maybe if I reread it at some point this year, you can check back on this video next year. The Book of Doors. This was a 4-star read, but honestly, I do think about it all the time. For now, it's going to go in I had a marvellous time. It wasn't a 5-star read for me, but I do think about it and its concept of time travel all the time. Like, it was such an interesting take on time travel, and I really had such a good time thinking about these characters, and I was a lot of the time like gasping at what I was reading, so it might end up going in the top tier. We'll see. City of Stardust is Mr. Perfectly Fine. It was good, well written, but just not like either way, do you know what I mean? Daughters of Olympus, I forgot that you existed. Couldn't tell you what this book is about. Didn't even remember that I read it until I was getting the images for this video. So that tells you that. And honestly, kind of same with Dancers of the Dawn. I remember reading this a little bit more, but I couldn't tell you what happens in it. Dragon Rider is Mr. Perfectly Fine. I feel like this series is going to get so much better as it goes on, but for now, the first book feels a little bit like it just doesn't really stand out to me. I don't feel like there were enough dragons as well for a book that's called Dragon Rider. Death's Country by R.M. Romero is also I forgot that you existed because I couldn't tell you a lot about this book. This is like a kind of Orpheus and Eurydice, I don't know how you say the names. You know the ones. Retelling, but it doesn't do it very well, and I don't remember enjoying it. And Ember in the Ashes is our first one that is going in. Help, I'm still at the restaurant, because I loved this book. This was 5 stars. It made it into my top 10 books of the whole year. When you consider out of 230 whatever books I read last year, it was in my top 10. It has to go in the top tier. This was just incredible. It's like martial fantasy. It is technically YA, but I think it's quite mature for YA. It's very brutal, and I am scared for the rest of the series based on just this first book. I'm scared for the emotions that that's going to take me on, but I'm also excited. Drown Me With Dreams is Should Have Said No, because I don't personally think there needed to be a sequel to the first book, which was Sing Me to Sleep. I quite enjoyed that. I feel like there was a really good sisterly dynamic, but that disappeared in this second book, so I didn't like it. The Diviners, I had a marvellous time. This was such a great start to the series, made me obsessed. I wanted to read on straight away. I love this series, it's so good. The Dark and Drowning Tide is, unfortunately, I'm going to put in Mr. Perfectly Fine, which is a little bit generous. It's not like I forgot that I read it, but compared to what I've read from Alison Saft before, it doesn't measure up. So it can just go there. Fae-bound. This is really hard for me because I enjoyed Fae-bound. I think it was like a 4-star read for me, but when I compare it to Sarah Elarifi's previous series, The Final Strife, which I think is one of the best epic fantasy series it's just finished but was being published at the time, Fae-bound doesn't compare to that for me. So I did have a good time reading it, but it also, compared to what I know of her writing, it felt like a bit more average. For now, I'm gonna put it in I Had a Marvellous Time because I like the author. A Feather So Black is... I forgot that you existed. It's not like I forgot that I read it because I read it in like December, so I do still remember it, but I think if I'd read it like earlier in the year, then I would have forgotten that I'd read it. So that's where I'm going to put it. Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands is Ida Marvelous Time. I love this series. I've just finished it. I read Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales in January, and it's like a solid 4-star series for me, but it's just so comforting and cozy, and I love the vibes. The Final Empire is Help I'm Still at the Restaurant. How could it not be? This was my first ever Brandon Sanderson book and I was obsessed. Truly such a great series. Mistborn is a great place to start with Brandon Sanderson. She says that having been the only series by Brandon Sanderson she's read. But anyway, at the best time, really. It was also in my top 10 books of the year. Fathom Folk is Should Have Said No. I did not like this at all. Moving on. This Fatal Kiss is Mr. Perfectly Fine. I enjoyed this more than I was expecting to. It's got quite a lyrical writing style, but it wasn't like a new favourite for me. The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. At the time I gave it 5 stars. If I were to re-rate it now, it would be more 4 stars compared to what I've read of hers before that I've really enjoyed. It wasn't her best book, but I really liked how she tackled the historical elements of the story, so I still had a good time. A Fate Inked in Blood is Help I'm Still at the Restaurant. I know so many people did not like this book, but I really liked it. I don't know what that says about me, but I had such a good time. I was absolutely obsessed, and I cannot wait for the sequel to come out. I think it comes out pretty soon, April maybe. I'm very excited for that. Five Broken Blades, for me, is Should Have Said No. For other people, I think it's better than that. I think other people enjoy it a lot more than I did, but I really didn't like it. I read it for the Goodreads Choice Awards video and it did not move me, let's say that. The Foxwife, I think, would be I Forgot That You Existed. Again, I read it pretty recently. I read it in like November, and I just think I would have forgotten that I'd read it if it was earlier in the year, and also even at this point I can't really remember a lot of what happened, so we'll go for that. Gallant by V. Schwab is... I gave it 4 stars. I did really enjoy it, but no, I'm gonna put it in Ida Marvelous Time. This, I love the atmosphere. Not her best book by any means, but I did love the atmosphere, so I'm gonna put it there. A Heart So Fierce and Broken, to my surprise most of all, goes in Ida Marvelous Time because I did not like A Curse So Dark and Lonely, the first book in this series, so I have been putting off continuing the series for years. I read the first book like 4 years ago, didn't want to continue it at all, but then I just randomly picked up A Heart So Fierce and Broken and enjoyed it way more than A Curse So Dark and Lonely, so to my surprise it's going in Ida Marvelous Time. Next we've got Foul Heart Huntsman, which it's going in Ida Marvelous Time, but when I compare it to Foul Lady Fortune, the first book in the duology, it doesn't shape up, I don't think. I loved Foul Lady Fortune so much, but Foul Heart Huntsman wasn't as good, I don't think. Goblins and Greatcoats is Mr. Perfectly Fine. This is like a fun little novella set in the world of Legends and Lattes, but it's literally like 26 pages long or something, and so you don't really get a whole lot out of it. It's just like a fun little add-on, I guess. So in the middle. A Fragile Enchantment is also, I feel like, Mr. Perfectly Fine. I love the vibes of it. I love the edition I have of it, but when I considered that I had predicted this to be a 5-star read for me because of the fact it's Regency, it's fantasy, it's Alison Saft, it wasn't the 5-star read I was expecting, so it's gonna go there unfortunately, and I can't remember a whole lot of what happened to it. Heart Song by TJ Klune is Ida Marvelous Time. This is the 3rd book in the Green Creek series, and this series is so emotional. It's like werewolves and a bit of romance, and I just love this series so much. I'm very scared to read the last book. Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo. What did I even rate this? I gave this 3 stars, so I think it's gonna go Mr. Perfectly Fine. I'm not sure that this series is shaping up to what I want it to be, but Hogfather by Terry Pratchett is also Mr. Perfectly Fine. I did enjoy this, but it wasn't what I wanted it to be, and also there's like no chapters in it, which must be like a known thing among Terry Pratchett readers, I'm aware, but this was my first Terry Pratchett book and I was kind of taken aback by the fact that there's no chapters, so that did kind of affect my enjoyment. Then we've got Her Majesty's Royal Coven, which is gonna go in Help I'm Still at the Restaurant. I love this series. This is so good. The first 2 books have been 5 stars, then the prequel was 4 stars I think, but I'm so excited for the 3rd book to come out later this year. Such a good series. The Head Witch of Foxhall is Should Have Said No. Not good. The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson is Help I'm Still at the Restaurant. This is so good. I love this series. I feel like this whole series is going to go in Help I'm Still at the Restaurant, honestly. Honey Witch is I Had a Marvelous Time. This is really cute, cottagecore, sapphic, romance, bees involved. The vibes are so good. The Hollow and the Haunted, I am going to put in I Forgot That You Existed because I can't remember anything that happened in it. I also reread the first 2 books in the Crescent City series last year before House of Flame and Shadow came out. So House of Earth and Blood is I Had a Marvelous Time. I really like the first book in this series. House of Flame and Shadow, which was last year's release, is I Forgot That You Existed. It's not that I forgot what happens in it, it's just that I kind of wish I could forget what happens in it, and I kind of wish that it had taken longer to come out because it wasn't, I don't think, it was probably the worst series ending that Sarah J Maas has written. House of Sky and Breath is Mr. Perfectly Fine, I think. The series starts off so good and then it just gets worse. Anyway, Inkblood Sister Scribe is Help I'm Still at the Restaurant. This is so good. This gave me chills when I read it. I love this. I think about it so much. So good. Kingdom of Sweets is Should Have Said No. This was like the second book that I finished last year and I hated it. Not good at all. It's like a Nutcracker retelling. Not good. The Hunting Moon is also Should Have Said No, and it should have said no because I should have said no to reading it. I did not like the first book in this series, which was The Luminaries. Is that what it's called? I can't remember what the first book's even called. The series is called The Luminaries. The first book also might be, but I really don't like this series. I've just DNF'd the third book, so yeah. I should have said no to reading it. But a lot of people like this series, so maybe it's just me. The King of Crows by Libba Bray is I Had a Marvelous Time. Final book in the Diviners series, and honestly, I'm quite emotional thinking about leaving these characters behind. If I Have to Be Haunted is I Had a Marvelous Time. This was actually so fun. It's a girl who can see ghosts and then her nemesis at school turned into a ghost, and then they end up going on this like adventure through these like portal realms and stuff that I was not expecting. Really took me by surprise. Kindling by Tracy Chi is I Forgot That You Existed. Don't remember anything that happens, but I do remember I didn't really enjoy it. Kingdom of the Wicked is Mr. Perfectly Fine. I was expecting to enjoy this a lot more than I did, but I didn't really like it. I feel like I'm gonna like the series more as it goes on. I hope so, because I own all the books in the series, but the first one, average. Neverford Hall is Should Have Said No. This is like a historical kind of fantasy. I can't remember when it's meant to be set, maybe in Regency times, but I really didn't like this. And same goes for Mistress of Lies by K.M. Enright. I was expecting to really enjoy that and I didn't. And also the same for A Letter to the Luminous Deep. This is a story told entirely in letters between the siblings of these 2 people who have gone missing. You also get letters that the 2 people were exchanging before they went missing, like a year previously, and I was expecting to love it so much. Like, it's such a cool concept. It's all underwater and I was really expecting to enjoy it, but I really didn't. Moonstone is I Forgot That You Existed because I kind of forgot that I read it. This is werewolves and YA and it's sapphic and it was okay, but I don't really remember a lot of what happens in it. The Lost Story. The Lost Story is obviously Help I'm Still at the Restaurant. I love this. This is like adult Chronicles of Narnia. So good. Think about it all the time. Need a sequel to it. Lair of Dreams is also I Had a Marvelous Time. This series as a whole is just really good, really fun, really well historically researched. So Long Live Evil. I was expecting to love this so much and I didn't. I think it was like a 2.5 star read. I'm gonna put it in I Forgot That You Existed. The reason I'm putting it there is because the author's story behind why she wrote this book is very emotional. She was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and this was the book that she wrote thinking it was going to be her last book ever, and so the main character is cancer and it's a really goofy time, but I didn't like the execution of it. In my heart it should have said no, but I'm just going to put in I Forgot That You Existed because of the author's story behind why she wrote it. Rewitched by Lucy Jane Wood. I'm going to put it in I Had a Marvelous Time. This was a 5-star read for me, but it's not quite Help I'm Still at the Restaurant. Do you know what I mean? Like, I love this book. It's so cozy. I love the self-love that it promotes. It's really good in that respect, but it wasn't quite top favourite. Powerful by Lauren Roberts. I enjoyed this more than Powerless, so let's put Powerless I'm going to put in Mr. Perfectly Fine. I enjoyed it, but I think I was expecting to love it a lot more than I did. But I did really like Powerful, so I'm going to still put that in Mr. Perfectly Fine. But hopefully when I read Reckless, whenever I will read that, I'll enjoy that more. The Palace of Eros is Should Have Said No. I did not like that. The Phoenix Keeper is I Had a Marvelous Time. This was so cute. This really reminded me of like House in the Cerulean Sea and Legends and Lattes. It's a cozy fantasy set at a magical zoo. So cute. Queen Bee is also I Had a Marvelous Time. Like, I did have a good time reading this. It just should have been a full-length novel. It was not long enough. Why was it only a novella? Ninth House is Mr. Perfectly Fine. I reread this ahead of reading Hellbent, and I think that although I like that I got to grips with the magic system and all of the kind of dark academia-ness of it the second time around it also made me realise that it was more the kind of shock factor of the first book that made me rate it more highly the first time I read it, because there's a lot that happens that you are kind of taken aback by, and I think that made me rate it more highly at the time. But second time reading, I obviously knew what was coming, so I could look past those bits, and I didn't enjoy it as much. The Poisons We Drink is I Forgot That You Existed. I completely forgot that I read this and couldn't tell you anything that happens in it. The Scarlet Throne, I remember that I read it, couldn't tell you anything that happens in it. But A Sea of Wolves is gonna go in I Had a Marvelous Time. I was not expecting to enjoy this as much as I did. This is like a Little Red Riding Hood retelling, but with pirates. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. Serpent and the Wings of Night is also going to go in I Had a Marvelous Time. I really love this. So fun, so addictive to read. Love the romance. But yeah, the second book, not quite measuring up. Somewhere Beyond the Sea is I Had a Marvelous Time. It was still a 5-star read for me, but it wasn't as good as The House in the Cerulean Sea for me. Love The House in the Cerulean Sea. That was my favourite book of whatever year I read it. But Somewhere Beyond the Sea just didn't quite measure... Not that it didn't quite measure up, but it is kind of like the same story all over again, and I just don't know that a sequel was really necessary. Ruthless Vows is going to go in Mr. Perfectly Fine. I didn't enjoy it as much as Divine Rivals. I don't want to say much more. Saint of Storm and Sorrow is I Forgot That You Existed. I can't remember what happens in it. I feel like I enjoyed it, but I can't tell you what happened. The Shadow Cabinet is honestly gonna go in with Her Majesty's Royal Coven in Help I'm Still at the Restaurant, because those two books together, I read them really close together as well, so it just, I love the world, I love the characters, and I can't wait for the third book to come out later this year. So Let Them Burn is going to go in I Had a Marvelous Time. This is dragons, as far as I can remember, and it's set in I think it's a Jamaican inspired world, and it was so good. I'm really excited to read the sequel, which I have got on NetGalley. Spectacular by Stephanie Garber. Does it go in Mr. Perfectly Fine or I Had a Marvelous Time? This is a like Christmas novella set in the world of Caraval, so it's very cute, very Christmassy, very festive, but it is just a novella. It doesn't really add anything to the story, so I'm gonna put it in Mr. Perfectly Fine for now. Spark of the Everflame. I'm gonna put it in Mr. Perfectly Fine. This is a fantasy romance, and I feel like I'm gonna enjoy the series as it goes on, but from what I remember, the main character was really annoying me at times, so yeah. Song of the Six Realms is Should Have Said No. I did not like this, and I also did not like the Spice Gate, but A Sorceress Comes to Call is gonna go in Help I'm Still at the Restaurant. This is by T. Kingfisher. I love this. This was the third T. Kingfisher book that I've read this year, but the other ones, although they are, I mean, A Red Nettle and Bone, which was a 5-star read, and I feel like that is more fantasy than horror, but I've still left it as horror for the purposes of this video, because A Sorceress Comes to Call is more fantasy than any of the three that I'd read. So I love this. This was so good. I love T. Kingfisher's writing style. I'm obsessed with her. Spellbound is gonna go in Mr. Perfectly Fine. I kind of vaguely remember what happens. I'm pretty sure someone gets turned into a cat at one point, but it wasn't a standout. A Song to Drown Rivers is also Mr. Perfectly Fine. This I read for the Goodreads Choice Awards video, and you can see my full reaction to it in that video, but it's labelled as fantasy, obviously, like it was nominated for the fantasy category, but it's just a historical fiction book with a fantasy kind of epilogue, and so I loved it for the historical parts, but in terms of it being a fantasy book, it's not a fantasy book, so I don't know. Starling House is going to go in I Had a Marvelous Time. This I really enjoyed. very gothic, atmospheric, eerie. There's a sentient house, really good. But 10,000 Doors of January, which I read in the later half of the year, is going to go and help I'm Still at the Restaurant. One of my favourite books that I've ever read. I cried, I laughed, 10 out of 10. No notes. Tales of the Celestial Kingdom, it's going to go Mr. Perfectly Fine. Just because there were a few, it's like a collection of short stories set in the world of Daughter of the Moon Goddess, and there were a few stories that I couldn't really remember like who was who or what the context was, so it's just going to go there. I think it's my own fault for maybe needing to have reread the first two books, but Time to Convert is Mr. Perfectly Fine. I liked it more than the Blackbird Oracle. This is the fourth book in the All Souls series and kind of follows a side character, but it just wasn't a standout. Tempest of Tea, I'm going to put it in Ida Marvelous Time. It's like vampires meets Peaky Blinders, and I did enjoy it, and also meets Six of Crows. I did enjoy it, just wasn't my favourite. The Tainted Cup. It's going to go and help I'm Still at the Restaurant. I love this. I read this for the Goodreads Choice Awards video, and I was not expecting to enjoy it as much as I did, but it was a 5-star read for me. I loved it. So good. It's like a fantasy murder mystery. Definitely gonna have to reread it before I read the sequel that's coming out in April, I believe it is. But I love this. This is definitely gonna become like a new favourite series for me, I'm sure. To a Darker Shore is gonna go in I Forgot That You Existed, because I can't remember what happens in it. Sunbringer by Hannah Kaner is gonna go in Mr. Perfectly Fine. This was not as good as the first book, Godkiller. The first book kind of brings this found family together of this god killer, a disgraced knight, a little girl, and the god that like lives with her. And then in this second book they're all separated and go on all these different missions and stuff, and I just wish that we hadn't lost that element of found family, because that was the strongest part of the first book for me. So hopefully the third book brings that back. Then we've got To Gaze Upon Wicked Gods. I did enjoy this. I'm going to put it in Mr. Perfectly Fine. I enjoyed this more than I was expecting to, considering that I feel like it's had a lot of issues, this book. It was review bombed on Goodreads, and then I feel like it was still getting some fairly bad reviews. I can't remember why, but I enjoyed it. But now I'm struggling to remember the details of it, so it's just not quite a standout read to me, but I did enjoy it. Can't Spell Treason Without Tea is gonna go in Ida Marvelous Time. I really like this. It's a cozy fantasy. It's Legends and Lattes-esque and really cute, and there's going to be quite a few books in this series. I think it's 4 in total. I've got the next 2 but I haven't read them yet, but I really like this. It was good. Twin Crowns is gonna go in Ida Marvelous Time with the other books in the series, because I really like the series as a whole. The Well of Ascension, you know where it's going. It's going in Help I'm Still at the Restaurant, because this series as a whole I just love. I'm still here, still thinking about these characters, still thinking about everything that happened. I loved it. What Monstrous Gods is Should Have Said No, because they should have said no to it. I couldn't even tell you what happens in this, but I just know I really didn't like it, and I'm pretty sure it's Raylo fanfiction rewritten, which unless you're the Blueprint Ali Hazelwood, it doesn't work. Where the Dark Stands Still, it's gonna go in I Forgot That You Existed. But I will say, I think I was just not in the headspace to read this at the time that I read it, because everything about it I should have loved, and from what I've heard of other people who've read it, like, I should have loved this. So I think it was just the headspace I was in, and possibly because the paperback is out now, I might grab myself a copy and try and reread it, or like grab it if it's 99p on Kindle at any time and give it a reread, because I think I would like it. Like, on paper I should like it. So it's going to go there for now. Percy Jackson and the Wrath of the Triple Goddess is obviously going to go and help I'm Still at the Restaurant. Percy Jackson is my favourite series of all time. I love it. I adore the series. I adore Rick Riordan. I adore these characters. I adore just everything Percy Jackson. Give it to me now. When these new sequels were announced, I was obsessed, and I just love this series, these characters. Percy Jackson and the Wrath of the Triple Goddess is like a Halloween story as well, and I read it at the week of Halloween, literally the exact times that it's set, and it was perfect. Perfect timing. I just had such a good time. And to finish us off from the 100 plus fantasy books I read last year, we've got Voyage of the Damned by Frances White, which is gonna go in Mr. Perfectly Fine. Now, I feel like poor Voyage of the Damned had the issue of it's also a fantasy murder mystery, and I read it pretty soon after I'd read The Tainted Cup because I'd loved The Tainted Cup so much that I was in such a mood for another fantasy murder mystery, and this was the only other one that I had on my TBR for the Goodreads challenge, and it just didn't measure up to The Tainted Cup, unfortunately, so I think it had that kind of going against it, but also I just didn't really like the main character a whole lot, so it's gonna go there. So those are all of the fantasy books that I read last year, tier rank. So as you can see, I've tried to be a bit selective with my top tier. I'm not all that selective, but I've tried to be as selective as I can. The two kind of middle categories are fairly big. I'm quite surprised at how many I put in Should Have Said No. I think it's just me being quite harsh, probably, but I'm quite surprised with that. But anyway, you can check out my top fantasy books right there in the top tier. Please read them if you haven't read any of them yet. They are so good. I had such a good time reading all of those, and I'm very excited to continue with a lot of those series, like An Ember in the Ashes. I'm so excited to read the next book. Very excited for the next book after A Fate Inked in Blood. I'm very excited for the sequel to The Tainted Cup, and of course I'm so excited to continue on with Brandon Sanderson and my Brandy Sandy journey, which the next one I've got to read is Warbreaker, so we'll see where that one, at the very least, hopefully I'll read more than just one, but where that one ends up and when I make this video next year. So I hope you had a good time watching this video. Let me know what you think of any of the books that I have tier ranked. What would be in your top tier ranking of your books that you read last year? Let me know. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. If you'd like to follow me on my Goodreads and my Bookstagram, the links will be down in the description below. Like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you wanna, and I'll see you in another video soon. Bye!